Nobody told me about the chickens. I know that sounds like a strange way to begin a story about my wedding day, but that is where it starts. Standing in my mother's kitchen at 4:30 in the morning, the sky still completely black outside, watching three women I had known my whole life moving around that kitchen with a certainty and efficiency that told me they had done this many times before. They were preparing food for 300 people. They had been doing it since the previous afternoon, and nobody had told me any of it was going to look like this. I was 20 years old. I was getting married in 5 hours, and I was realizing, standing in that kitchen in the dark, that there was an enormous amount about this day that I had not been told. My name is Rebecca, and the story of my Amish wedding is not the story I expected to be living when I was living it. Let me explain what I mean. Growing up in our community in Ohio, weddings were things I had attended my whole life. Other people's weddings, cousins and neighbors, and the daughters of families I had known since childhood. I thought I understood what they were. I had seen the ceremony. I had sat through the long hours of hymns and preaching. I had eaten the food and helped with the clearing up afterward. I thought I knew what I was walking into when my own turn came. I did not know anything. The first secret they kept from me was about the work. An Amish wedding is not an event that is organized by a small committee or catered by an outside company. It is a community undertaking of a scale that I had somehow, despite attending dozens of them, failed to fully comprehend from the outside. 300 people fed twice in a single day. Mountains of food prepared entirely by hand. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, creamed celery, the particular wedding cookies that our district had made the same way for generations. All of it coordinated across multiple kitchens, multiple families, an invisible network of labor that had been running for weeks before the day itself. And at the center of all of it, invisible to me until my own wedding morning, was my mother. She had been carrying the weight of this organization for 2 months before I understood it. 2 months of quiet coordination, of lists and logistics, and the management of 300 people's food and seating and movement. All of it conducted in the background of our ordinary daily life, while I floated through my engagement in a state of anticipation that I now understand was, in part, made possible by the fact that someone else was doing the actual work. I stood in that kitchen at 4:30 in the morning and watched my mother move, and I felt something shift in my understanding of her, of all the women around me, of what it meant to make a thing look effortless from the outside. The second secret was about the ceremony itself. I had attended Amish weddings. I had sat through the hours of preaching and the slow German hymns sung without instruments, the particular weighted solemnity of the service. What I had not understood, from the outside, was what it would feel like from the inside. Specifically, from the inside of the couple's bench, where my future husband Eli and I would sit for the entirety of the service, which lasted between 3 and 4 hours, largely without moving. No one told me what to do with my face for 3 hours while 300 people watched me. No one told me what the preaching would feel like when it was about you, when the bishop's words about marriage and faith and the covenant between a man and a woman were directed at you specifically, at this choice you were in the process of making publicly and permanently. No one told me that the moment of the actual vow, so brief, a few minutes inside a 4-hour service, would arrive so quietly that I almost missed the transition between waiting for it and living inside it. Eli looked at me when we stood for the vow. He had a steadiness in his eyes that I recognized and was grateful for. And I said the words I had been given to say, the same words that couples in our district had been saying for generations, and I meant them with a completeness that surprised me, not because I had doubted that I would mean them, but because meaning something in your imagination and meaning it while standing inside the actual moment are two entirely different experiences. That was the part nobody had prepared me for, the realness of it. The way the weight of it landed differently than I had expected. The third secret was about what came after. Not immediately after. Not that evening, though that was its own kind of discovery. I mean the days and weeks that followed. The way married life began not with a dramatic transition, but with an almost jarring ordinariness. The morning after my wedding, I woke up in a house that was now my house, with a husband who was now my husband, and the first thing that needed to happen was breakfast. Not a special breakfast, just breakfast, eggs and bread and the same morning rhythms that had governed every morning of my life, now relocated to a different kitchen with a different person sitting across the table. I had expected to feel different, I had expected the fact of being married to announce itself in some internal way, to feel like a clear before and after. What I felt instead was the texture of the ordinary pressing in from all sides. The dishes needed to be done. The bread needed to be started. Eli went out to the barn. I stood at the kitchen window and looked at the yard that was now my yard and thought, so this is what it is. This is the life I have chosen. It looks exactly like life. That sounds like disappointment. It was not. It was something stranger, and in some ways more interesting than disappointment. It was the first moment of genuine adulthood I had experienced. The moment when you understand that the life you have been given is not going to announce its meaning to you. That you are going to have to find the meaning inside the ordinary. That the extraordinary thing about a marriage is not how it feels on the wedding day, but how it builds itself, slowly and unremarkably, out of the accumulation of ordinary mornings. No one had told me that. Not directly. The older women around me had lived it. You could see it in the way they moved through their households, the ease and the weight of it combined. But it was not the kind of thing that was said out loud. It was one of the things you were apparently meant to arrive at on your own. The fourth secret, and this is the one that stayed with me longest, was about the watching. At an Amish wedding, 300 pairs of eyes are on the couple for most of the day. Not in an unkind way. In the way of a community that understands itself as a witness, to the covenant being made, to the new household being formed, to the continuation of something they all consider sacred. That witnessing is real, and it is meaningful, and I do not say this to criticize it. But what nobody told me was what it would feel like to be the thing being witnessed. To have your face, your composure, your visible emotional state become a kind of public text that everyone around you was reading. I cried during the service. Quietly, briefly, in the way that is acceptable for a bride. What I did not do, what I understood without being told that I must not do, was let anything complicated show. Joy was acceptable. Solemnity was expected. But the full complexity of what I was actually feeling, the love and the fear and the grief for the girlhood I was leaving and the genuine uncertainty about the size of the thing I was stepping into, none of that had a place in the public ceremony. I held it carefully behind my face for 4 hours and let the acceptable version of it show. I have thought about that a great deal since. About the gap between the inside of a moment and its public face. About all the things a bride is feeling that the ceremony has no room for. About whether the gap is a problem or simply the nature of public ritual, that it asks us to make something inward into something shared, and in doing so, necessarily simplifies it. I do not have a clean answer to that. What I have is the memory of standing in my mother's kitchen at 4:30 in the morning and watching those women work, and understanding for the first time that the beautiful, effortless surface of something, a wedding, a marriage, a community, a life, is always held up by labor that happens out of sight. That the seen thing and the thing that makes it possible are never quite the same. I want to ask you something tonight. Is there something in your life that looks one way from the outside and feels completely different from the inside? A role you inhabit, a relationship you are in, a version of yourself you present to the world, and the private reality underneath it that nobody quite sees. Because I think most of us are carrying that gap in some form, and I think the most honest thing we can do is acknowledge it, not perform it for anyone. Just know it ourselves. Just let the inside of our own experience be real to us, even when the outside has to look a certain way. That is what my wedding day taught me, not what I expected to learn, but the truest thing I took from it.